The water in that basin was clean and cold. And I want you to understand, nobody had filled it. Not that year. Not in 40 years. But it was up over the rim, right to the lip, waiting on somebody's feet. And mine were the only feet standing in that church. I want to tell you I ran. I didn't. I stood there in my socks, looking down into that water, and some part of me that wasn't scared at all was already reaching for the towel folded on the pew beside it. Settle in. Pull the blankets close and let the static fade, because this one starts slow, the way the mountain likes it, and it takes its time getting where it's going. My name is Noah Tillman. Before any of this, I was a preservation architect, the kind the county calls in when they need to know whether an old building is worth saving before they knock it flat. I'd done churches before, old ones, small ones, the kind that get forgotten once the last of the congregation dies off or moves down to the valley towns where the jobs are. Yellow Creek Primitive Baptist Church was one of those. It sat up in Persimmon Gap, off a gravel road the county hadn't graded in years, and it had been locked up tight since 1983. Getting up there took the better part of an hour once the pavement ran out. The gravel narrowed down to one lane past a shuttered feed store, then again past a low water bridge with no railing, until the road was just two ruts in the weeds, with laurel closing in tight on both sides. I didn't pass another vehicle the whole way. Didn't see another house either. Just a few collapsed barns and a trailer or two lost back in the trees. Persimmon Gap wasn't a place people drove through anymore. It was a place the road used to lead somewhere, before whatever had been down at the end of it stopped being worth the drive. The county wanted to run a bypass road through the gap, and the church sat square in the right-of-way. Before they could touch it, state law said somebody had to walk through, write down what was there, and decide if it belonged on the historic register. That somebody was me. I had one day. I was supposed to be in and out before dark. The building itself wasn't much. White clapboard gone gray, a bell that hadn't rung since Reagan was president, pews with the varnish worn through in the shape of 40 years of Sunday mornings. But the inside had been left alone. Hymnals still sat in the racks. The pulpit Bible was still open to wherever it had been left. Whoever locked that door in 1983 had done it meaning to come back, and then never did. Dust hung in the light coming through the windows, thick enough that I could watch it move when I walked. The air smelled like cedar and old paper, and something underneath that I couldn't place at first, faint and mineral, like a well that hadn't been drawn from in a long time. Every footstep echoed different in that empty sanctuary than it would have in a full one. You notice a lot of small things when you're alone in a building that's been waiting 40 years for somebody to walk back through its door. I want you to know something about primitive Baptist churches up in these hollers, because it matters to what happened. Communion in a church like Yellow Creek wasn't just bread in the cup. It came with an ordinance most folks outside these mountains have never heard of: foot washing. Based on the old story of Christ kneeling down before his own disciples with a basin and a towel. Once a service, sometimes twice a year at the big meetings, the congregation would pair off, and one would kneel and wash the other's feet, and then they'd trade places. Nobody left that circle having only given. Everybody who washed got washed back. That was the whole point of it. Humility going both ways. Families used to come from 3 or 4 hollers over for the big meetings, the way I understood it from what little I could piece together later. They'd walk in from Sourwood and Millstone Creek and places that don't even show up on the county map anymore, bringing covered dishes for dinner on the grounds after. The whole day built around that 1 hour in the circle. Old folks who remembered it told stories about the sound of it. All those bare feet on the plank floor. Water sloshing quiet in the basin as it went hand to hand down the pews. Nobody talked much during it. That was the rule. You knelt, you washed, you got washed, and the silence was supposed to be its own kind of prayer. Silas Vance, or Abe, as most of you have taken to calling me by now, has walked through a lot of these little mountain churches over the years, and I'll tell you, some of you writing in have been with me since the very first case file, back before this channel had a name you'd recognize. And it means something to have you still here in the dark with me tonight. If this is your first time settling into one of these with me, welcome. Pull up a chair. There's room. Now, back to Noah Tillman and Yellow Creek. In the back of the church, past the pulpit, there was a small vestry room, hardly bigger than a closet. That's where I found the cedar chest. Inside it, folded linen towels, yellowed with age but clean, and underneath them, a tin basin, wide and shallow, the kind you'd use for washing feet or scalding a hog, depending on the week. Next to the chest sat the church roll book, leather cover cracked down the spine. And I want you to understand I wasn't looking for anything strange. I was cataloging. That's the job. I opened that roll book the same way I'd open any ledger in any old building, because a good preservation report wants names, dates, evidence of use. The roll went back to 1911. Names in a dozen different hands over the decades, added as members join, and beside each name a column of small marks. Tally marks, I figured at first, until I looked closer and saw they came in pairs. One check for washing, one check for being washed. Every single name on that page had 2 marks beside it, evenly matched, all the way down. Generation after generation of this little church keeping its books balanced. Every name but one. Near the bottom of the last page, in a hand steadier than most, was written, Verna Odell. Beside her name sat 11 checks in the washing column. 11 services where Verna Odell had knelt down in that circle and washed somebody else's feet. And in the other column, nothing. Not one mark. I didn't think much of it right then. I figured it was a clerical oversight, the kind you find in any old ledger. I photographed the page for my report and moved on to measuring the rafters. It was maybe an hour later, with the light going gray outside the windows, that I heard the dripping. It was coming from the vestry room. I told myself it was a roof leak, which wouldn't have surprised me in a building that old. I went back to check, and that's when I found the basin sitting out on the floor, no longer in the chest, full to the brim with water that hadn't been anywhere near a working pipe in 4 decades. I want to be honest with you. I picked it up. I don't fully know why. Maybe I thought I'd spilled something moving the chest earlier and hadn't noticed. I lifted that basin with both hands to set it back where it belonged. And the second I did, I felt it. Plain as anything. Not cold exactly. Expected. Like the basin had been sitting there waiting on somebody to finally pick it up. And it had decided that somebody was me. The dripping stopped the moment I touched it. The whole building went quiet in a way that old buildings don't usually manage. All their settling and creaking just switched off at once, like something had gone still to listen. I set the basin down on the little table in the vestry room and told myself to finish the survey and get out before dark, same as I'd planned. That's when I noticed the floor. Damp footprints, bare feet, leading from the vestry room out into the sanctuary, toward the front pew, where the towel had been laid out neat and square, like it was waiting on somebody, too. I checked my own boots. Dry. I hadn't taken them off. That's when I heard the humming. Low. Just a few notes, coming from somewhere behind me in the sanctuary. The kind of tune you'd know if your grandmother ever sang over a stove. I couldn't place the words, but the shape of it was old, church old, the kind that gets handed down without anybody writing it in a hymnal at all. I turned around. There was nobody there, just the empty pews and the dust still hanging gold in what was left of the light. I called out anyway, said I was with the county, said I didn't mean any harm being there. The humming stopped the second I spoke. It didn't fade out. It just stopped, the way a radio does when somebody reaches over and switches it off. Here's the thing about a church like Yellow Creek that most folks don't understand until they've spent an evening in one alone. These buildings were built to hold accounts. Every marriage, every death, every child brought up front to be dedicated. It all went in that roll book. And the foot washing column wasn't just tradition. Up here, folks believed the exchange had to close. You couldn't just give humility out into the world and have it float there unanswered. Somebody had to receive it back, or the circle stayed open. If you're just settling in with us tonight, this is a good moment to hit that subscribe button quiet-like, so you don't miss whatever case file the Redacted Archives digs up next. 11 times Verna Odell knelt down and washed somebody's feet in that little church, and 11 times, for whatever reason, nobody knelt back down for her. I found out later, going through what county records still existed, that the church closed sudden in the winter of 1983. A bad flood took out the bridge over Yellow Creek the same night as a big meeting, and the congregation scattered home in the dark before the service finished proper. Verna Odell passed that same winter. The record didn't say how. It just stopped. I asked around some after, the way you do when a thing won't leave you alone. Talked to an old man at the feed store down on the pavement who remembered his mother mentioning her. He said Verna Odell had been the one who always volunteered first at the big meetings. Every service, rain or shine, kneeling down before anybody else could offer. He said his mother used to claim nobody in 3 counties had washed as many feet as that woman. He didn't know why she never got washed back. Didn't know if it was an accident of the night the flood came, or just the kind of thing that happens when a person spends their whole life giving and forgets, somewhere along the way, how to receive. He told me not to go up there after dark. Said his mother never would, not even in daylight, not after 1983. I thanked him and didn't tell him I'd already been. I didn't know any of that yet, standing in the sanctuary with wet footprints drying slow on the floorboards in front of me. What I knew was that the light was almost gone. My truck was a 1/4 mile down a gravel road I didn't want to walk in the dark, and something in that building had decided I was the one holding the basin now. I tried the front door first. It wasn't locked. I'd unlocked it myself that morning, but it wouldn't give. Not stuck, not swollen with damp, held. I put my shoulder into it twice and got nowhere. And somewhere behind me, soft as anything, I heard the roll book's pages turning on their own, one after another, slow, like somebody was hunting for a particular name. I went back and looked. The book had opened itself to the last page. Verna Odell's name was still there. 11 checks still sitting beside it. But underneath hers, in ink so fresh it hadn't dried yet, sat a new line. Noah Tillman. No checks beside it yet. Just my name, waiting on its column to fill in one way or the other. I want to tell you I panicked, and maybe I did some, but mostly what I felt was a kind of quiet, heavy patience settling into that room. The same patience you'd feel off an old woman who's waited a long time for something and isn't in any hurry now that it's finally close. I understood, standing there, that I wasn't going to get out of Yellow Creek by fighting the door. I was going to get out by finishing what got started the day that bridge went out. There wasn't anybody else in that church to wash my feet. And there wasn't anybody for me to wash either, not that I could see. Though I want you to know I felt certain the whole rest of that evening that I wasn't alone in the room. I did the only thing that made sense to a scared man standing in his socks at dusk. I knelt down at that front pew, and I washed my own feet in that basin, one and then the other, slow, the way I imagined it was supposed to be done. The water in that basin went still the moment I finished. And when I checked the roll book after, there was one new mark beside my name. Just the one. The front door opened easy after that, like it had never held at all. I walked that gravel road back to my truck in the dark with my boots on over damp socks, and I didn't look back at the church. Not once, though I wanted to. And that wanting is a thing I still can't fully explain to myself. The drive back down took longer in the dark than the drive up had in daylight. The laurel pressed in close on both sides of the truck, branches scraping the mirrors here and there. And the low water bridge with no railing felt narrower crossing it a second time. I kept the radio off the whole way. I couldn't have told you why, except that the quiet felt like something I owed the evening, the same way you'd keep your voice down leaving a room where somebody was finally, after a long time, resting easy. By the time I hit pavement again, my hands had stopped shaking, though I hadn't noticed them start. My report went in the next week. I recommended the church for the historic register. I don't know if the county listened. I never went back up to Persimmon Gap to check. But I'll tell you something I haven't told anybody else. And maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just a man's mind working overtime on a dark road. Some nights, when the house is quiet and I'm near sleep, I feel my feet go cold. Both of them, right at the arch. The exact spot where a hand would rest if it were washing them. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't scare me anymore, not really. It just feels like waiting. Like somewhere back up in that hollow, in a church that still isn't torn down as far as I know, there's a basin sitting full, and a roll book with my name in it. One column checked, and one still open. Somebody has to close a circle like that eventually. I think about who it'll be. I think about whether they'll know to bring a towel. This has been Silas Vance, Abe, if you've been with us a while, bringing you another case file from the Redacted Archives. Thank you for settling in with me tonight, wherever you're listening from, whatever kind of dark you're trying to get through. If Yellow Creek finds its way into your dreams, I hope it's gentle with you. Rest easy. Let the static take you the rest of the way down.